Sam Telfer is the Liberal candidate for the seat of Flinders. How are you going?
Good morning. Good to talk to you.
All right. Look, I'm sure you're covering a lot of kilometres, getting all over the electorate, trying to get votes for the poll on the 19th of March. Just first of all, the infrastructure requirements when it comes to getting grain out of South Australia, out of Australia to the world that needs it in what's looming as a global food crisis. How are we going with the ports and getting grain to where it needs to get to?
Oh, it's absolutely a priority of mine, and the Eyre Peninsula is a massive contributor to the state's economy and predominantly a major source of the South Australian grain and canola. And we really do need to make sure that the infrastructure we get in place is fit for what the modern needs of our farming businesses are. So I've been a big one for trying to push forward to look at port opportunities on the Eyre Peninsula and specifically on the eastern side of Eyre Peninsula where there's deep water and to actually have a grain industry that's in conjunction with other potential industries. There's so much upside on the Eyre Peninsula and we can do so much if we get that infrastructure right.
Now, it's there's a risk, it looks like to me at the moment, that it's the eastern states where they're really struggling to get grain out when they had a big harvest. But are we needing to look at this Cape Hardy, for instance, again in terms of getting an additional port on, or is the T-Ports port enough for the Eyre Peninsula in terms of getting grain out quickly enough?
Look, I do think it needs to be a combination model, and I've been a big supporter of a project like Cape Hardy, which actually looks at options for all sorts of industries. And it's not just grain, which we can produce on the Eyre Peninsula. There's also minerals and other products which we can export out of a facility if it was appropriately made. So at the moment, all the grain on the Eyre Peninsula goes out either at Port Lincoln, Thevenard, or as you're saying, the new T-Ports facility, which has only been used for a few years. We need to make sure that the connecting infrastructure to that is all up to date as well, and that's why I've been really encouraged to see the amount of investment which has gone into our road network. And I, for one, if I'm successful on Saturday, will be pushing for more of that and make sure our highways are fit for purpose for getting our product to our export.
Yep. Now, there's always more to be done when it comes to roads and rail. What specifically are some projects you'd like to advocate for in terms of improvement, widening or bitumising some roads?
For me, the priorities, a few have already been ticked. So the Eyre Highway, the Todd Highway, the Lincoln Highway have all had good work. The Bird's Eye Highway, which goes east-west. For me, the next steps are getting product through Port Lincoln in the short term, making sure that the street arrangements there are actually fit for purpose for the modern vehicle and truck, and also the Flinders Highway, Ricky. So that goes up the west coast, and specifically for mine, two areas which are really a high priority are between Streaky Bay and Ceduna and south of Elliston. They're two areas where an extra widening of that road is going to make a safer road, not just for truck movements, but for everyone, for the caravans that we're seeing all over the state at the moment, as well as for our domestic use.
Yeah, and that widening you mentioned on that particular, the Flinders Highway, that's not something the Liberal Party has made a commitment on at this stage, but something you want to advocate for as local member if elected?
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be my priority areas, and that's what I've told the community. We've seen these wide roading put in place, and it makes a safer road. A wider road's a safer road, and the works on the Flinders Highway will be priorities for me to be advocating for.
Yeah, across on another peninsula, on York Peninsula, the hot topic there has been the conflict between farming and mining exploration interests. What's your position on resolving those? There was a select committee that made recommendations about adjusting the balance on that. Do you support giving farmers a few more rights in this area?
Yeah, I actually presented to the select committee when they were over on the Eyre Peninsula and highlighted some of the issues which farmers had over here when dealing with mining exploration companies, when farmers aren't especially equipped to do that. So I was one which really pushed for an independent advocate to be working on behalf of farmers so that they don't feel isolated, so that they're actually knowing that they're not getting the raw end of a deal. And also to have some more certainty for farmers when an exploration company comes in, so they know a bit more about exactly what would happen if actually came to a pass to have a mine site within that footprint. We really need to make sure that farmers are protected and looked after, and they have a lot more certainty than they've had at the moment, because we've really been left in a position where farmers, for a number of years, continue to be in this point of uncertainty.
Well, something else that's been uncertain is the staffing levels from health professionals, from doctors and nurses to other allied health professionals across the peninsula. We know Woodner's had its problems, and to some extent we know if the federal government's got a role to play here in allocating or encouraging people into the profession and then out to regional areas. What are you going to advocate for the seat of Flinders if you're elected?
Yeah, you're right. There really does need to be a multi-pronged solution to this. And as far as the state position goes, we need to make sure that we've actually got a structure which encourages doctors and supports doctors. At the moment, we've got a lot of small, isolated communities, and doctors end up feeling very isolated themselves, ones that are actually in communities. And like you said, there's communities all around the Eyre Peninsula and the state that seem to be have arrangements in place which don't suit the modern needs of our doctors. The doctors that were here 30 years ago in practices, those sort of professionals aren't in place now. So we need to have arrangements which are actually suitable. I want to push for a greater level of local input when it comes to these decisions, and making sure that when doctors are placed within communities, that there's support structures so they can have leave entitlements, so that they can have professional development, so they can be properly recompensed for the work that they're doing. And we also need to develop incentives for doctors to not just encourage them to come out into smaller communities, but also to keep them here.
Well, in near the Victorian border, the community of Bordertown and Keith, they're looking at a model where there's maybe more paramedics allocated locally because they simply can't get doctors locally. Is that a kind of model that you might look for on the Eyre Peninsula, or do you sort of force to have multiple doctors so it's not all on one doctor on call all the time?
Yeah, I think we need to make sure we're not trying to just have temporary fixes that last for a long time. I think we really do need to have doctors and registered nurses within communities, and make sure that those levels are staffed to a point where communities are sustainable. We've got great opportunity for growth on the Eyre Peninsula. We need these basics right. We need to get our health right. We need to make sure our education's right. We need proper infrastructure. With those things in place, our communities can really thrive.
Now, in health, preventative health always a good idea, and the state government has committed to increase the amount of money, or at least match Victoria and New South Wales with kids' sports vouchers. But then it comes to the facilities that are available. Have you got some commitments about how you want to improve local footy, netball and other sporting facilities?
I think this has been a really good news story for regional South Australia in particular, Ricky, over the last 4 years, because we've actually had a government which has been investing back into our regions, and we've seen some of the projects which normally wouldn't get up and get moving, really had state government incentive to get communities enabled to move forward. And I've been excited on the Eyre Peninsula to see a few of these. I spoke recently to 2 football netball clubs at Cummins who are building a joint facility with state government enabled funding. So these sort of projects are really key to make sure that communities are going to be able to be sustainable into the future, and not just sustainable, but really look at opportunities for growth. We need to get the basic infrastructures right, and it has been exciting to see some of the investment back into our sporting facilities, and I'll be a strong one for that to continue to happen.
Well, Sam, we spoke last time about mobile black spots, but you didn't hit any in this conversation, so that's good news. We'll catch you after the election, see how it's all gone.
Absolutely, always a pleasure.